It's Thursday afternoon, it's 4 p.m. in Central Europe, and it's 5 p.m. in Israel. And it's Space Café Israel time again. Our Space Café Israel by Meidad Pariente will begin very soon. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback, and we will learn and improve based on your feedback. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, and we are an online-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. First, we would like to thank all our private and corporate supporters who are committed to keep our independent journalism alive. We really appreciate that. In case you want to join the supporter team, be aware it's just a click away on our website. And I know many of you are familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and our daily newsletters and the Space Café podcast. So don't miss the latest episodes, which features the wonderful Anouesh Ansari talking about her own space journey, the X Prize, and much, much more with our host, Markus Moslechner. We also have new episodes on our Space Café radio. The latest one from today features Professor Dr. Uwe Kantner, the chairman of the Commission of Experts for Research and Innovation in Germany, about their annual report. And a new mini-series called Space Factors, about connecting space leaders with aspiring students and innovative thinkers in the Italian space sector, with his first episode with Luca Rossettini, so the CEO of The Orbit, is also out, and it's in Italian language. So Meidad, it's especially for you, mate, to train your Italian. You will find all of our episodes and all these audios wherever you get your podcast from. And if you want to become a space watcher, let the world know about it. And with your mug or your wonderful t-shirt, visit our fan shop. It's on our website. And if you missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive on our website in the event section. And of course, we are on YouTube. Please note that we host our Space Café Israel live regularly. And with that, my job is done for the moment, and I hand you over to your host today, Meidad, over to Hotar Sharon. I think you are in your cellar. So
thank you, Thorsten. No, I'm actually at the roof. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Space Café Israel, episode 11. My guest today is Lior Herman. Lior is a co-founder and managing partner at Type5 Aerospace VC, an IT product engineer who worked with leading enterprises like Microsoft, Facebook, Varonis, IAI, and the IDF. Lior is a full-time entrepreneur and futurist, an expert in product research and deep tech analysis, technology solutions architecture, and leading experience design for startup companies from early vision to production and scale. Today, we're going to talk about product challenges in space technology. Welcome, Lior.
Hey, Meidad, good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's great opportunity for me to discuss this, and I'm really sure that our audience will learn a lot. As always, let's get to know you. Can you share something personal that people don't know about you and isn't written in your LinkedIn profile?
The first thing that comes to my mind that I'm a sci-fi geek, so I'm, a fan of Star Trek and all the science fiction novel in general. So that's a lot of, my ideas and creativities is around looking at science, looking at technology, and look how they can work together in the future, create new problems and many, many new opportunities and life events. So that's part of me that is not on my LinkedIn profile for sure.
So Star Wars or Star Trek?
Trek for sure. I'm not into fantasy. I'm into the, the screws and the plasma tubes, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Lior, what is Type5? What is it all about, and how are you different from other VCs specializing in the space industry?
So Type5, first of all, it's a management company that both raising a fund, but also helping companies within the space ecosystem and deep tech to achieve, better results, scale, better strategy, positioning, marketing, and of course, exit eventually. We are relatively new, as you know. We have been less than 2 years since we launched Type5, and today we are an umbrella that include both the fund, working with startups and entrepreneurs, and also leading the conversation. What is in Israel is now the Space Tech Nation and the Space Tech Summit, which is a little bit more focused on technologies and startups than what was we believe before we came into the picture in Israel, at least. So that's a little bit about us. We are a team that comes from multiple backgrounds. As you mentioned, I'm a product manager in my profession. I come from the high-tech sector, and other team members coming from the banking industry, family offices, aerospace executives, strategy consultants, and a lot of multiple talents in one group. We think that it's important, just like space is about collaboration. So when you want to create a business that is involving space, you got to have a lot of accumulative talent. So that is what Type5 is all about. We are much more broader than what we were started about 2 years ago. As the mission expanded, as we understood that our place in the industry is not just to deliver smart capital, but it's also to create value and to be like a venture studio firm that helps companies to succeed eventually.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Type5 aimed to raise $110 million US. How far are you from your goals, and what funding is already available for space startups?
So we are in the process of raising the fund. It's it's been a challenging year with the current market conditions. One of the challenges of investing and deploying capital in this economy is that the valuations of a lot of companies has dropped. So investors and LPs that we're working with are kind of like sitting on the fence. In terms of raising, I could tell you that we completed the fund a year ago. But as far as deployment, and I think you can see it not only in Type5 but with a lot of other VCs, there is much more caution, and there is much more looking for specific and important milestones, like from post-seed to round A and above. Investors and LPs are really looking at cash flows and revenues and tangible assets. It's not like just telling a good story and about a good evaluation. It's really about generating a cash positive and positive EBITDA type of business. So we're in the process. The funds that are available are mostly corporate funds that are interested in the space sector. We see it coming from multiple industries, not just the space industry. We also see it from transportation industry, from healthcare, from medical, and even from energy. So the funds are available, but it's a much longer relationship and a much longer process with investors today, and that's where we're at.
Okay, can you quote a number? What is available today for your investment, for direct investment in new space industry?
I don't have any limited to what's available. It's more depending on the company and the fit to the investor. The money is there, you can say it. It's always been that case with capital partners. The money is not an issue whether it's 5 or 10 or 20 million. It's more about reaching those KPIs. So it is available, but it's a question of matching. matching the company to the right capital.
Okay. I want to pick your brain regarding something that I discussed with one of the CEOs of an Israeli startup in the space industry that said that since in the space industry, ROI, return on investment, is between 5 to 10 years, it's much more suitable to do pre-seed, seed, pre-A, A, pre-B, B kind of rounds, and have achievable goals and achievable milestones, which is a bit different in the space industry. What do you think?
I think that it's true. It's I would say it's almost even not realistic when you're talking about space startups, because it's like talking about internet company that cannot connect to the internet in a way. So reaching to space is one thing, and developing a business for space is a whole different thing. My belief is that in order to have a good business model in space, you first have to get a good feet on Earth actually, and prove that your technology can be deployed for a well-established industry while you're building your NASA contracts, your DoD contracts, your the type of business that will actually, the type of business model that will enable you in the space as well. So it's a big challenge, and we see how companies today, even Israeli startups that reached to space already, take Stemrad for example, that I'm sure you know well. A lot of their business coming from medical centers and nuclear facilities. So my answer is that entrepreneurs that want to build a space, startups, they cannot focus only on space. They must create a real business model that utilize and catalyst from space. That would be the challenge to start with, and you can see it happening, in the Silicon Valley. If you take, for example, Varda, Varda space industry that has been talked a lot recently because of Peter Thiel investment. I think what's interesting there is not only the fact that probably the most experienced investor in the Silicon Valley puts his weight on this company, but their business model is quite unique. They're actually building on royalties from the pharmaceutical companies, and not just about the platform that they provide for the experiments in space. So meaning they are creating their value proposition on Earth, and then they are scaling and experimenting and working in space. So that's the biggest challenge.
So to reach outer space, you need to plant your legs deep in the ground.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Unless you want to be just a subcontractor that working just with a limited customers, but then it would be very hard for you to have a sustainable startups company that is space tech. You'd be maybe like a subcontractor or something very limited. It would be hard for you to have a sustainable business.
Lior, your entire career was around products and the life cycle of a product. Why did you choose the space industry as your next challenge?
That's a great question. About 5 years ago, Meidad, I exposed to a lot of conversation around space. Obviously the known achievements of Elon Musk and other media publications, but also I looked at government regulations, a lot of reforms that are taking place, a lot of talks in Washington about how to open the space economy. I saw an amazing lecture by Stephen Quest that I recommend everyone here that watch to Google it and look it up on YouTube. Stephen Quest was one of the senior colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and he was one of the advocates of the U.S. Space Force back in 2016, 17, when it was still like a pipe dream. Today, when the Space Force is like consolidating almost every technological aspect of NORAD and other space commands, it's a mainly reality. But back then it was, pipe dream. And what he said that space is not about the technology, it's about the strategy. And the other thing that he said, that if the US want to become, a spacefaring nation and succeed in catching up with China and the other countries, they must create, a space economy that is privatized, because that's where the national security will be lay in the next 20, 30 years and further on. And that's kind of like the tip of the iceberg of things that I learned and realized that they are like a tipping point in how, governments and countries and people in general are looking at space now. And I realized that, space is basically open for business. I'm not the first guy to say it. There's a book about it also by a nice guy from Canada. But what clicked for me is that space doesn't have any product methodologies. It seems to be very, kind of like 101, creating whatever parts there is, doing the integration, getting whatever contract you have with the government, and operate. And I noticed that if you are really looking at the entire technology from a 360-degree angle, and you utilize it not only for what it's doing today, but you are creating what product manager do is a new stakeholder and a new value proposition, and you enlarge that so you can convert a very small, subcomponent space company that is just selling for main manufacturers or space contractors, and shift them into a B2B2C using a product strategy that will, automate some of their offering and will provide, let's say, kind of like a software as a service business model that in the end of the day, what it will entail is that the same company would be able to keep selling for, big enterprise and big space contractors, but will also have a channel for a B2B2C. Mainly they will be able to work with, software developers in any SaaS company and offer their space application. So when I kind of saw that scenery change and my experience within the cloud industry and high-tech industry, I felt like there's a big gap here, and that my experience and my, my time seeing the life cycle of tech companies can be translated into space and can make a lot of impact. And that's how the connection came. It was a slow burn, like 5 years of total research. But when I started to dive into companies, everything clicked, and it was really, really looking like we are, in baby steps in space. And from their moment on, we started to talk with a lot of enterprises, with Type5, with Amazon and Microsoft. And all of them have space strategy already, but it's not already in the developer's hand. It's not in, the software manager, the product managers and the sales managers' hands yet. It's just like in the infrastructure layer, like what is called in the cloud, the IaaS, the infrastructure as a service layer. And we felt like, just like the cloud started the same thing and became completely web-based app and software as a service-based app, that's exactly what's going to happen to space in the next 10 years and above. So I hope that it answers the question, but, it's kind of like looking at previous cycles and just matching them into space.
So if I get it right, the challenge was the thing that really took you, except being a sci-fi enthusiastic. So the challenge of taking your knowledge and implemented it in a new industry, and that's immediately connected to the our talk today. The conversation is about product challenges in the space technology. So you see this as a challenge that you think you can change the weaknesses of not having a product strategy in the business?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it will have an immediate results, both on the company's valuation, their ability to raise capital, but most importantly is the final result, which is the exit. Because at the end of the day, what we need, especially in Israel, but also in the tech industry in general, is to show that there is a good returns on on space startups. And the only way to show it is not through, having a great component that NASA is purchasing or Lockheed Martin is purchasing. It's great, because in the end of the day they can acquire you. But if your solution can be also sold to, let's say, Magellan, which is a GPS company, or to BMW, which is an automotive company, or even to, let's say, McDonald's, which is a food company, using some data that you can deliver them, that can make a difference in how they're utilizing their, production chain or logistics chain, or even, their food supply chain, then you're going to have much more success in the product valuation and your ability to exit to much more interesting stakeholders.
Interesting, very interesting. We're talking about an industry that is called aerospace or space, yet you, like me, are not an aerospace engineer. Do you see this as a weakness or as a strength?
I don't know to tell you, because I haven't been a space engineer. Maybe if I was, I would tell you that it's much better. But I can tell you that Elon Musk has been asked a few times already, how can he succeed in building a rocket company, but he's not a space engineer. And he said that he's he was an engineer, but in different fields. And he said, I have a great team, and he obviously is a visionary, and he's into the details, the nick and dimes of everything that he does. And I think that's something that I'm doing in general in everything that I do. So being an aerospace engineer or not, I'm in the high-tech world, I'm a product configuration engineer. So when I look into a product in the space industry, I'm looking at each component, each part, each flow of the technology, and make sure that I both can understand it and make an impact on it, and ask smart questions or stupid questions, but at least get an answers, and learn from that. And I think that by having that, I'm simply doing a product engineering job. So maybe it's not, from the aerospace per se, but I'm applying it on space. And I think that that's a way to go, and a way to build a progress.
Okay. You mentioned the fact that the space industry is mostly a bespoke industry. So just recently, mass production started, and thinking about hardware and software solutions as products. How do you see your role, Type 5 and you in personal, in the education phase of new companies, to understand that this is a business and it's a means to an end and not the actual goal, using space for business and not using space for space?
Yeah, that's a great question. You started with part of the answer. You said it's a lot of market education. One of the best examples that I always tell investors and stakeholders is that take a bookstore back in the late 90s. One bookstore started an online business to sell its store, and the other one is just printing physical books, and open a new a new branch, a new location in a different town. Which one do you think is going to be more valuable? Which one is going to be more scaled? Which one can be more successful in 10 years? Simple, it's a simple answer, right? So yeah. I think space is not a domain, meaning it's a catalyst. It's a catalyst in 2 or in 3 ways. First of all, when you're talking about downstream, it's a catalyst with data. It can provide new data that is not available to make decision, right? In upstream, it's a catalyst because it can help you to produce new materials that are stronger, lighter, more conductive, more performed than you can do on Earth using the unique conditions of zero gravity, right? And when you're talking about space as a platform, you all of a sudden have a lot of, automation, AI, remote, remote work because of the unique conditions. So having those three together, the upstream, downstream, and space, remote, treatment, manufacturing, and services, it brings you to a place where anything that you do for space is a catalyst for industrialists on Earth, and applying that, as I said, to almost any business, can generate new products, new revenues, innovation, new business models, and also cost-effective solutions. So the market, the work for us, as you said in the beginning of the question, it's really a market education. It's to take those big corporates, to take those big, enterprises, and to show them that if they are indulging a space strategy, a space catalyst strategy, can create the next wave of innovation, the next wave of growth, which is exactly like the bookstore in the late 90s that started an online portal.
And how do you educate small businesses, small new space companies about the importance of having a product strategy?
Actually, that's something that I cannot do. I see a lot of entrepreneurs, and some of them are getting stuck on, just the vision, and they try to apply for a NASA grant or the European Space Agency grant or even Israeli Space Agency grant, and they're kind of stuck on the space application alone. For those companies, it's a little bit harder to help because we have, a buffer of the government. And the only way for us to be effective and bypass it is if the team and the founders can think outside of the box and make a progress while they are building the space frontier, or even if they're using existing space integrators. You can take a Gorilla Link. Gorilla Link is a known company, for example, that I think they're doing a fantastic job. One of the things that made them successful very early is obviously they did got a grant from the Israeli Space Agency, but they also started to work with one of the biggest integrators in Israel, which is Spacecom and Gilat. So using the existing players in the market, they created for them like a smarter, faster channel into space applications that are sold on the Earth. So they're not bound. They don't need to wait for some constellation to start to operate. They can sell their subcomponent, which is connectivity between cell and satellite today. So that would be the type of strategy I would recommend to space companies to look at the value chain and to see how they can fit in today while they're bringing their full-blown strategy solution,
Yeah, got it. There is a notion, Lior, especially in Israel, that VCs, venture capitals, today are CCs, capital, with a show me the money kind of spirit, and invest only in space companies that already generate revenues. Is how you see it?
No, that's not how I see it. As I said, we are a venture studio and value creators as well. We are not just looking at the final numbers, and that's exactly why we are helping startups with advisory services that helping them to attract the capital to capital, as you said, but in terms that are best for them, and do not ignore them if they are not there yet. Because I think one of the problem of the VC world is that not a lot of people know that VC is expensive capital. Meaning, let's say that you raise 50 or 100 or $200 million fund, you have a limited resources as a venture firm with your fees, your management fees, to do a lot of things like, obviously deploying capital, but also regulation, licensing, policies around your deployments. You have to do a lot of monitoring, and not only that, you got to make sure that the companies that you invest in has the right due diligence team and the right investment committee involved before you deploy. So being a VC is quite stressful, actually, because you have a lot of problems that you have to tackle in order to make an investment. And even after the investment, the reporting and the management has to be really effective. So investors will want to stay in the fund and want to reinvest in the fund and reinvest in the companies in later rounds. So it's not just the VC, it's the entire cycle. So again, I think that the best way to bridge for it, and that's why Type5, I think, is providing something relatively important, is because we understand space. We understand space, we understand the business models of space, and we know how to tackle and create solutions that will bridge between the capital to capital need of a profitable business like venture capital, but in the same time, we'll be able to create the value so the capital can be earned eventually. So simply put, we're just trying to fill up this gap of being a classic, dumb VC, so to speak. And maybe one more thing to add is the other gap I think that there is existing today. It's between the seed round, the government grants, and the seed venture capitals, and the round A. I think that one of the things that we are focusing on as a team in Type5 is the entire go-to-market and commercialization aspect. I don't think that that's developed enough. And you can have, let's say, 50 or 100 companies that are pre-seed. They have wonderful ideas. They have an amazing teams. They got awesome grants, but they don't know how to move fast enough or smart enough between the seed idea to the round A. And that's the whole difference in high tech, but also in space. And I think in space, it's more critical because you have much more narrow space for mistakes, and you have much less experience in how to bridge that gap, with the right strategies and the right tools.
Interesting, and educational for sure. Full disclosure, Lior, you and I served at the same tank company few years apart at the IDF. And here we are, both working in the space industry. And I wanted to ask you, is there a connection between tanks and spacecraft?
I don't know, Meidad. Maybe there are tanks in space and we're just not aware of that. But no, but seriously, I think that being in a tank, it's kind of like being in a little spaceship, It's like literally you're like inside of a, metallic machine. What you see around you is computers, it's scanners, it's buttons, it's a lot of switches. I was the Ta'an Kashar, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's basically the link between the cannon operator, the commander, and the entire weapon systems. So
and also responsible for the communications.
Exactly. There you go. So for me, I was like inside of a little spaceship. Obviously, it's much more bumpy. It's not smooth, and it doesn't go on warp. It's actually getting stuck every 100 feet because it's a very, very, very low tanks, old tanks that we use to operate. But I think that the technicality in solving problems and being really precise in what you do, because tank is very risky, by the way. If you're tired for 1 hour, if you're not careful, if you're not sharp, you can slice your hand in one of the spins of the cannon. It's like super risky. So I think being in a command position, in a trooper position, but inside of a complex machinery system, is something that later on can be translated into even more complex applications like space. So maybe that's the connection, but maybe we are just alike. I don't know, but that's my theory at least.
And what about the teamwork aspect? You have to work as a team, unlike aircraft pilots that are more one-man show. Is this something that you feel that
yes,
developed your capabilities and you use it today?
absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned it because I think that, team accountability in tank is something that can, as I said, save life. I literally saved one of, I guess, our driver life, but also my entire team life in one of the training. It was over 20 years ago, and lucky enough, he's one of the, I would say, board members involving in Type 5 today, over 20 years later. So putting your life in the hand of your team members is something that goes and propel and stay with you for forever. So I think it's also you're right. It's a very good point, and it stays forever, basically.
Okay, nice approach. Next time somebody will ask me what I did, I will say I served in the ground small spacecraft corps.
Exactly. It's a good analogy.
Okay, Lior, shout out time. Which Israeli space startups and companies should we follow? And please feel free to mention as many as you want.
Wow, you tackle me now. I think that there's a lot of good companies out there. I recently met an interesting company called FMVAT. I don't know if you heard about them. They're not only for space, they are actually a metamaterial design company, which is very critical and important for space. Metamaterials, if some people here are not aware of, are complex nanomaterial that are critical for space operation, and the ability to simulate their behavior and to find new properties is critical for the next years in the space industry. So FMVAT is an interesting company that developing an emulator to work on such metamaterial. Another company I already mentioned is GorillaLink, which I think is an interesting company that we work with closely with Type 5, and we're also building today a new an interesting strategy for B2B2C, as I said in the previous question, and I think it's an interesting development to see how they are translating their capabilities today into much more broader stakeholders and software developers and so forth. And another company I can recommend, I have to think clear, that I'm not giving too many tips to other companies. I'm just kidding. But let me think about another one, and I'll tell you before the end of the industry.
Okay. You can also recommend companies that are in the portfolio of Type 5 and you think we should follow and expect great things from. So
yeah,
whatever you want to.
Absolutely. As I said, the GorillaLink is a company I can mention, and another company that I think is important, and it's interesting not because what it's doing today, but it's because of its future capability. It's Red Sea that developing the red blood cells, which is another critical life or death solution for remote treatment in space, but obviously in the blood donation market. But what's interesting for me, again, as a product analyst, product manager, however you want to call it, is that their technology is not only relevant to create synthetic blood cells. You can create using stem cells in space, much more critical body nutrition components and supplements that cannot be provided otherwise. So Red Sea is a very interesting company for space. And also, as I said, in Earth applications.
Interesting. Synthetic blood cells.
Yeah, and I personally bought some of their stocks, early on. So it's an interesting company.
Synthetic blood cells. That's really almost like a science fiction story, but
Exactly. And until we're going to have those medical pods that we see on Star Trek, we need to have the capability to use machines to donate blood. That otherwise, if we don't have the people to donate, we're stuck. So it's a little bit sci-fi. It's in between sci-fi and reality, but it's definitely a reality.
Great. So later on, I will ask you to write me all the names that we mentioned, and in the publication that will go out in a few days, I will share all the links to all the companies they mentioned, so the audience can go online and search for them. Last question from my side, Lior. Where do you see the Israeli space industry in 2050?
That's a very good question. I can tell you what I hope to have in Israel. I hope that Israel will have a spaceport in 2050, and I hope that Israel will be one of the dominant countries in developing space components for space transportation and also for space communication. I think that Israel's capabilities, in communication, in cybersecurity. Recently, we saw an interesting Israeli company in the quantum area that is developing a transceiver and receiver for communication in space. QuantLR, I don't know if you're familiar with them. So I'm hoping that in 50 years, Israel will be one of those leading countries that are able to duplicate the successes of the cyber industry into space communication and also to space transportation with a nice spaceport near Tel Aviv or Haifa. But that will be a great success story for us. And obviously hoping to have much better rockets than we have today. I believe we're only in the beginning of the launching capabilities.
Maybe in the Negev desert, that will be a suitable place for a spaceport.
Yeah, Negev can be a great place. I agree. Maybe so.
Okay. Yo, thank you very much for all your answers, candid answers, might I say. And without further ado, Torsten, the floor is yours. Would love to get some questions from the audience.
Sure. Our wonderful Chris came back with a question, and that goes hand in hand with your last statements earlier. When you do value chain analysis and go to market evaluation, how do you look at the cost of transportation to space? Since that cost will keep decreasing over time, how does it impact use case, credibility, and a decision to invest now?
Thank you, Torsten. That's a good question. The thing that we need to look at the most is, what is the service provided in orbit, and whether it can be tested today using an existing space platforms, like an existing constellations. What do we need to prove the concept, and what would be the operation costs? Because in the end of the day, companies will not be able to raise, I think, at least in the short term. Maybe in the long term it will be much easier. They will not be able to raise, let's say, $500 million or $1 billion to build a constellation from day one. Would have to use a bridging solutions. So I think one key investment criteria for me would be how the startup can build a solution that can utilize today's infrastructure and to create the right economy of scale into the future, into the future platforms that will be available. That will be critical, because we are literally moving between, if I'm taking the internet as an example, we are literally in the years of moving from the slow, ISDN internet into the ADSL and then fiber optics. We are right in between stage 1 and stage 2. in space launching. So we gotta bridge those gaps with smart, agile services. That would be a very important key for investment and for future platforms. Yeah.
So, Lior, just a second, Torsten. So, Lior, for you as an analyst, do you take into consideration the fact that cost to get to orbit will continue to reduce?
Yes, of course, but I'm more looking at the economy of scale of the proposed business and what is the actual service that will be dominate once the product is in orbit. Because I'm taking into account that, you know, raising enough capital to reach to space is what? Let's say 10% maximum from the overall capital being raised. What's the other 90s are for? If I can answer that well, the launching is, I would say, is a small problem today, luckily. It's not the less of the problem. You still gotta make sure that, you know, you'll be able to reach orbit. And that's another conversation that you and I had before the podcast about insurance, which is another interesting and unexplored aspect of sending product to space. But once you bridge that gap, I think you're in a safe zone, and and that would be a good criteria.
I will stay on this note of transport to space. When last week at the Financial Times event, they had Dylan Taylor there talking about his 10 predictions for the year 2030. So what is in 7 years? What is not that far away? And most of his economic vision was on the existence and the success of Starship. So, and this new level of access to space, so mass, material, whatever, so that this access, what you just mentioned as these 10-20% of an emission, will go smaller and smaller. But if that is not there, I mean, at the moment we have a shortage on launch capacities right now. I mean, Europe will see tomorrow the last launch of Ariane 5, and then Ariane 6 is somewhere, so to say, in the stars. But how do you see that? How do you evaluate that?
It's a good question. It's like, you know, think about it, that you're sitting in a traffic jam. You have 2 hours to arrive to Derech HaShalom in Tel Aviv, which if you're in Israel, you know, it's a very, packed intersection of Ayalon. And then you see a bus riding next to you on the, on the public transportation lane, and it's got 60 passengers, like 60 cars just passing next to you. So it will take you 2 more hours to reach to Azrieli, to the end of Ayalon, but you still get there. So I think today the main problem is to get through this bottleneck, this traffic jam of launching using this bus called Starship. But I don't see it as a go-no-go barrier. I just see it as a medium stage delay. I believe that in 1 or 2 years, Musk will be able to have Starship ready. And when he does, I think that a lot of other, maybe Firefly and maybe other competitors will start very quickly to develop their own buses, Starships. So that would be very interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of view. I mean, we see Rocket Labs with their new development, but it's all slow paced compared to other developments. On the same note, Ramesh from India asked how much focus is being given for SSLV, the Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. Not sure that I'm getting the context, but I'm just putting out the question. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting industry. I think that it's advancing a lot. We see a lot of new smart propulsion systems, like magnetic propulsion, ion propulsion, even water propulsion, that all of them are aimed to do one thing: to extend the lifespan of the satellite, to allow them to maneuver, and to allow them to reach orbit in a most safer, faster, and more economic efficient way. I think that this space is becoming a little bit crowded, but not proven enough. So it's all question of capital, time to market, and really developing a solution that can be proven on Earth, meaning with the right agreement before you reach, development and orbit stage. So it's a very interesting market, and I believe that every space operator in the next 20 years will have by its side one of those tow truck, services for satellite.
Is this, as we talk about space sustainability and the debris or context, is that an area that you as an investor looking into? And do you see it as a commercial market at all? Debris mitigation, debris removal, debris reusage, or whatever. There are many concepts out, from...
Yeah, I see it as a part of a value chain that I think that is important, that maybe involves, insurance, platform monitoring, and not per se only that aspect as a service. But I think it's too limited, and I think it's too much risky as only as a single vertical. So I would want to expand that in order to feel more comfort to invest and to deploy those services.
Okay. So I think we have time for another question here from Andre. Thank you for that. So what sectors, topics are the biggest opportunities from your point of view, both in space or in the segments of economy impacted by new space technology or infrastructure?
So definitely,
let's start writing it down.
So I think it's the most difficult one, but it's the most promising one. It's definitely, I think, the space manufacturing. I think that anything that you can proven to manufacture in space that provides for you new properties that are game changer is a zero-sum game. You can have a faster communication. You can have your own software solution. You can have a lot of things that are, I would say, incremental progress. But if you can leapfrog an industry, let's say fiber optics, from, let's say, 1,000 tera, which is 1 feta, into 100 feta byte of information, that's a game changer for the data industry. So I would explore those leapfrogs of space manufacturing on the short term. What can we do today? What can we design today? And I would look at the design phases, not at full space manufacturing, because that's a little bit more far down. We still don't have the platforms, and as you said, the launches are still like, we don't have the bus yet, the first bus. But I think the ability to design materials in space is going to be a game changer, and that's an interesting industry for many fields, not only for one. It's not just pharmaceuticals, it's not just fiber optics, it's a lot of industries. And I think that once they are conquered, once they are realized by existing corporations here on Earth, it's going to be a race for new. It's going to be a new industrial age. It's like in the 1800s, a new material came to the market, which was plastics. And I saw a great documentary in the History Channel how toys inventors were able to switch from babies and kids' toys that are based on wood, very kind of like a Wild West type of toys, into a real modern age plastic toys that we use today. That was $1 billion industry just for toys. We're not talking here about anything. I'm not talking about cameras. I'm not talking about automotive, about anything else, just that simple industry. So I think once we realize that in space, we're going to have a boom of new products and new features in many industries.
I don't want to stick on the plastics thing and where it brought us as humanity, because that's a completely different track. But as you said, in space manufacturing, and you mean really something to produce in space and bring it down to Earth, correct?
No, so I made the specifications. So that would be phase 2. which is
Okay.
a little bit more, after we have the manufacturing platform. I'm talking about design new material using space, using zero gravity. That's a very interesting field. Companies like Space Pharma is doing that today, and Varda is working on doing that today. It's about creating, for example, new proteins that can fight cancer using a better synthesis that is based on the zero gravity that basically lays down the elements in a way that you cannot do them on a lab on Earth. Okay.
So that's just the design in space, but the manufacturing, the mass manufacturing, what is needed for pharma or so is then on Earth. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be for the immediate stage, but I think that for stage 2, it would be the full production in space. That would be amazing. Once we can do that, that would be the full game changer.
Because you mentioned the fiber optics, and I know about the fiber quality that you can achieve in space, but you can't replicate it on Earth. So it's not something you modify. You just have to do it in space and then get it back. So what is another bottleneck then, obviously?
Yeah. So and again, for example, that's a great example, because I think if, let's say, a startup company would be able to bridge that gap by creating a better relays, just the relay solution that are based on space manufacturing, not the entire fiber, which is obviously heavier and much more weight to carry up and down. But if you can do it only for the relays and to create a smarter relays, then your entire fiber optics network that is worldwide now, it's deployed on the bottom of the seas. I don't know if people know that, but there are huge ships that are laying cables between continents, and they have relays every few kilometers to buffer the signal. So if you can create a better, more sustainable, more stronger, more bandwidth to those relays, you already achieved an incremental value for a multi-billion-dollar industry. That's an example how you can bridge today.
Got it. Thank you. So no further questions. Meidad, back to you.
Thank you.
Lior, it was a pleasure. I hope that it was a pleasure for you too. And I'm sure that our audience enjoyed our talk, and it was very educational. Thanks for being my guest. And I already have 3 guests for the next 3 episodes, but stay tuned and you will get noticed. And Torsten, back to you to wrap it up.
Yep. Interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. So tomorrow, and that's the outlook of our next events. Tomorrow we are planning our next Space Café Austria by Sabine Ponkgruber. But we heard her guest, Margit Mischkulnik from the ministry, had some issues with tomorrow's appointment. So that might be cancelled or postponed. So just stay tuned for further information. But on the 22nd, we have our next Space Café Brazil by Ian Grossner with a wonderful Manuel Heiter. That would be very interesting. And for the 27th, mark your dates at 4 p.m. Central European summertime. We have our next Space Café 33 minutes with, and the 3 dots are now lifted here with the wonderful Kevin O'Connell. For those of you that doesn't know that, with Kevin O'Connell, we are producing a podcast series called the Space Economy Insights with Kevin O'Connell and the wonderful Dr. Emma Gatti from our end. And then on the 29th, we're also supporting the next Space Bar by the Astro Agency. And for your long-term planning, on the 5th and 6th of July, we will be at the Space Forum in Brussels if you want to meet, to chat, or just to hug us if you like us. So that's from my end. Please find and subscribe to our events on Eventbrite. And as always, we would like to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter or Facebook, not Facebook anymore, but on LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up for our daily or bi-weekly newsletters. And if you want to support even more events like that, get and treat yourself with something special and become a space watcher today, or help us in our supporter program. We are also open for help from venture capitalists. Lior, just saying. So thank you very much for your interest today. Thanks, Meidad and Lior, for this inspiring talk. And yeah, and we call it a week almost here. Thanks to the audience for joining. Hope to see you in the next event. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. And don't forget to become a Space Watcher. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you guys. Ciao.